I get really nervous when people say, you need to move on, you need to move on. And I say, my philosophy on death and dying things is that if somebody personal, when I say personal, on the stress chart, the loss of a parent, child, or sibling is #1, and then way down the list are job losses and other things. But that's a #1 thing, and that particularly the loss of a child, okay? And if people say you're going to get over it, my philosophy is you don't get over it. There's certain situations you never get over, and there's nothing wrong with that. A friend of mine wrote an editorial in Automobile Magazine. I'm sure you all get Automobile Magazine trains and Airliner Magazine like I do, and National Bus Trader. But some really hot articles in there. But at the back of Automobile Magazine a few years ago, Jean Lindemuth wrote this article, and she said, "Dead men in my Rolodex." And she said, it's interesting because she said, I've been well known in the auto industry for years, and she said, I knew Ferdinand Porsche, the Ferrari family, all these, Shelby from the Cobras, et cetera, and some of the Fords. And so she said, whenever anybody's writing an article, in one of the buildings, they had a number of magazines, but she worked for Automobile Magazine, but they'd run over and say, now it would be your BlackBerry, but can I look in your Rolodex and get the number of so-and-so? And she said, inevitably somebody would say, why do you still have so-and-so in there? They're dead. Why do you have so-and-so in there? They're dead, And she said, I thought about it, and I thought, well, sometimes if the person was important enough to be in my life and in my Rolodex anyway, what's wrong with flipping by and for a second thinking about them, in a positive way? And that's what part of my philosophy, and my philosophy about, you dealt with death and dying and whatever, is that when you're, people talk about the fact that, time heals all wounds and eventually, it will not be a problem. If it's somebody very close, very personal, whatever, my philosophy is time changes the quantity of time you feel sad, but the intensity, the quality of it is still there. If you've lost a child, a parent, whatever, you'll know what I mean, is that, when somebody first dies, you're numb. I feel like, when my partner died, it was like, there was like at least 90 days of I was either numb or sad, no other feelings. I remember crossing the street in front of the French Marketplace in Santa Monica Boulevard when it hit me that, ooh, I have other feelings now, and it wasn't so good, because now I was sad, miserable, angry, and everything else. I think you have those feelings, you get sad, you do whatever. But I think down the road a piece, the amount of time, instead of, when somebody first dies, you're like thinking of them 24/7. You see one that reminds you of it, and for 30 seconds, the loss is just as strong as it was when it happened. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that's life. If that person was that important in your life, you shouldn't just leave them. And because, my philosophy is when the person dies, how at first you run to wherever they were before. It's like, I'm going to spend time with this person, I want to be at home. And then I found, a friend of mine went through the same thing. I found like somewhere around 90 days later, I went home, I was like, you're not here anymore, And then, my feeling is like, okay, the person's part of me now, okay? And everybody I deal with is impacted by the people that have been close to me, who've died and whatever. Take it any way you wish, whatever your religious beliefs are, but I'm influenced by that person. So they're now with you. You don't have to look at a specific spot. You don't have to look at whatever. They've impacted your life, and they impact everybody that you're dealing with from there on. You know what the hour of the wolf is? It's between 3 and 5 a.m. In the morning, the lowest energy time. It's when people die that have been terminal. It's when people commit suicide. It tends to be the quietest time and the least energy that's going on. And it's, if you happen to wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning, that's when you tend to think of all these horrible things. I don't have any money, I don't have whatever. And things look a lot better at noon than they did at 4 in the morning. But at 4 in the morning, you're like, ooh, this is a rough time. And I do talk about suicide a lot because people get upset with me. I think I mentioned it in your group. My philosophy is, client comes in, I'm so depressed, I'm thinking that it's time to end my life. And I'm like, okay, it's an option, now let's talk. And people are like, you can't say that, you got to tell them that that's a horrible thing, they're going to, whatever. My philosophy is if they've gotten that sad and that depressed, I'm not I shouldn't say that, no. But my philosophy is if you feel that sad, things must really be bad. And they don't need me to sit there and say, you're going to rot in hell if you do that. Or that's very selfish, you're going to ruin it for the rest of your family. Why are you doing this to us? They've got to feel pretty miserable already. They need me to sit there and say, wow, this really sucks, let's talk